So I'm really honoured to introduce now Skeena Rathor, who's going to be our first speaker for the weekend. So a warm welcome to Skeena. Really good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
A co-founder and spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion, and has been part of the visioning group, the visionary group behind Extinction Rebellion, and particularly the co-liberation movement, which I hope we'll hear plenty about today. Looking at how we bring non-violence right the way through these campaigns for change. And also within Skeena's background has her Sufi heritage, and where this weekend we're looking at heart, soul, faith and unity, and how all of these things inspire the work that we do. Will be really great to hear some more about that as well today. So we're looking forward to hearing Skeena and what you're here to share with us. So welcome. Is there anything? So let's begin with the kind of the co-liberation, which is there as the one of the topics that we're here to discuss. Would you be able to begin kind of introducing what co-liberation means and what it's about, and introducing us to that, please?
Thank you, Jonathan. I want to say more of a hello first. Just to land and honor what's here. I want to just honor Annie for a moment as well, and her eldership and bringing us in, and actually listening to her, I feel like there's not much I can add to the beauty of her wisdom. I want to say salam, because that's my heritage in terms of hello, and may God's grace be here with us, and shalom, because I married into a Jewish family, and yeah, just wanting to bring our whole selves. I'm wondering about all the many souls here on this call, and the lineage of that whole self, the rootedness of the whole self. And I wonder if it's okay if we just have a moment just to really welcome our whole who-ness. Sometimes I call it our who-ness, our full who-ness. Yeah, just inviting us all to become that here now with each other. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. So you asked me about co-liberation, and as a place to begin. Thank you, John. I also want to express as I talk, many of you are here and will be able to bring much wisdom, and I want to stand with some humility in the great, wisdom traditions that are present, and also their knowings, there's a word, pluriversality, the many countable and uncountable ways of knowing. I love that word, and just knowing that I'm a tiny part of our collective knowing. So co-liberation, so it emerged, maybe there's a story really to tell in terms of where it came from, and it came from this heartache that, in terms of the vision that we were holding around Extinction Rebellion and for the world, our world, that it seemed that the deep collaboration needed for that repair and recovery, and that ability, the capability to restore and to be present in the work with each other didn't feel possible. It felt impossible, and more within Extinction Rebellion and around it. So by October 2019, there was such for many of us in XR, there was a real kind of flatlining and a conflict, tension, and what do we do if we, if within this incredible movement that there is all these places where we're separated. So it was came from that heartache and a prayer to go, well, what's needed now? What's in the way? What's needed? Who do we? What's our being? You know, what kind of being and who are we becoming? And I was really grateful, because I didn't really want to go back to doing racial justice work. It felt like something that I've been doing from the age of 15, and I wanted an XR. I wanted to be in another place, you know, with something that felt more embracing and wasn't about the color of my skin or the issue of, you know, racism that felt really labor intensive for me throughout my life. So, but you know, the thing was that I realized the separation story was where it's at. It's where it's at, and it's and so very, very blessed. You know, it was such a blessing that Mickey Cashton and Victor Lewis. Mickey is the founder for the Global Movement for Nonviolent Liberation, and Victor, the Radical Resilience Institute. Both incredible humans that have some wisdom, right? Have some elders have been, you know, wrestling and with this and dancing with it for many years. So they mentored me, and co-liberation was born. And what it feels like it's the work of is the knowing and being that my freedom and my safety and my flourishing depend on yours and mine. So we've expanded what liberation means by including safety and flourishing, because most liberation work is focused on freedom, right? And we're thinking about the knowing. What is that knowing, and what is that being of that? And so it's a deep inquiry. It's a praxis as well. So that's theory and practice. So there are mind-brain pieces, and then what feels groundbreaking in co-liberation is that we're saying there's body-brain work to do. This is about our bodies, and our souls, I would say. And then there is the other thing that to mention is that there are 4 pathways that we've identified, and 5 dimensions of the work, and also some frames, some terms of reference, or some frames of how we would approach the work. So it's becoming more and more detailed. We have an amazing co-liberation team of people thinking and being together in it. We're failing all the time. I'm in the Samuel Beckett quote: fail again and fail better. I really feel very much in that, because we are failing in it, and we're failing better, and there's much, you know, learning and you know, and collective. The collective liberation feels like the work in it. So it, you know, it's like I'm on this co-liberation journey as part of the work, or designing it, or so it's intense and very rich. There's a beauty to it, and it's a story, you know, it's a story around, okay, we are in there's a mass consciousness of scarcity and separation and powerlessness and soullessness. And that Mickey's partly that's one of her frames, right? And they're what do we do? And we're saying, well, co-liberation is here to be in service to the what do we do and how do we do it? Yeah, how do we come back into, therefore, abundance, felt sense of abundance, connection and togetherness, and power and soul, you know? So that's,
No, fantastic. It really sounds in what you're saying that what you are creating within the micro, within the movement, as it were, is reflecting something that is also kind of part of the journey that we all need to be doing on the macro, the wider, as you say, that kind of wider kind of thought sense with it. And you know, as you say, failing all the time. But it sounds like that's kind of a big part of the journey with it, is that process. And I just wondered if you're able to kind of talk about any lessons that there have been so far in this, because, you know, the lessons that you're finding within this journey of these failings and then working with, and that process is kind of lessons for all of us again, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks, John. I can feel myself going, oh, I'm going to go. And this is a very vulnerable conversation now, which is perfect. And I'm noticing that place in me that wants to just go, oh, you know, yeah, the vulnerability feels hard, still feels hard, but it's part of the liberation process, right? The lessons, you know, because every time it is a falling over and a bruising. You know, I feel like bruised, and there's a sensitivity that's growing, which is also part of the liberation. And I think that's true for many of us. I think there's a collective, there's an increasing capacity to feel, and therefore when there's an increasing capacity to feel, that's everything. That's joy and you know, celebration and gratitude and appreciation. You feel it. You can feel all the, and there's pain, and there's, you know, there's the places in you that want to hide and that you're noticing, and that, you know, there's the contraction energy as well as the expansion energy that you start to notice, right? So I think that's the first lesson, actually, that I maybe is, you know, in itself, that there's a lesson of going, oh, I didn't realize that in doing this work, I was going to feel more. Therefore, I'm going to need more time to integrate those big feelings and those waves. Yeah. In the recovery, there's a recovering of self, right? And in the recovering of self, there's a great remembering. I'm in a vast remembering. So that, you know, that my background is partly as a trauma therapist. And I kind of knew that and I in my early 30s, I did a batch of about 5 years of intense trauma integration work. But I'm really going there again. And in remembering and in recovering, self-win relationship, always in relationship, there's so much space that we're needing to, it's a slowing, the pace is just like a whole different pace that's being asked of us. Slow right down, because there's so much to feel and so much to integrate and come back to, so that you can go deeper into relationship. You know, there's a deepening and that needs so much. So that feels part of, you know, the lessons. There's a lesson around meeting people where they are, and again, like some kind of work for me and us to do around where really, so here's an example, because we're here in a very self-selecting collective bubble of people, right? Who's not here? Why aren't they here? How do we speak to those? How do we be in relationship? You know, how is the more than human voice here? How is the neospheric? There's a bias, you know, one of the dimensions I talk about in co-liberation is the neospheric. Where's that voice? And of course, that's what we're leaning into here for sure. This with the sacred. So that's a big thing that's going on, because actually I've run a course, one of the 4 courses, the experiences of co-lib I've run. I didn't get there, John. I wasn't able to meet people where they were. There's lots of reasons for that, but you know, oh, that's really aching and sore. So it's that, and yeah, I'll pause there.
Oh, super. I mean, that's kind of, it really echoes when you were talking that to do with that first lesson of the vulnerability with our feelings and the need to slow the pace down. You know, there's an echo in the thread of what we were left with when Annie was just talking at the end there, to do with our emotions, but also to do with the pace of nature. You know, it's very common in that kind of disconnection that we have with the land. There's also that disconnection with self. And as soon as a feeling or emotion comes up, it's like, okay, how can I busy myself and get on with something?
Yeah.
Well, now if we are going to be kind of
Yeah.
becoming more in tune with that. There's a slowing the pace, but there's kind of
Yeah.
that, I guess, comes in with that safety that there is with as you bring that kind of point of safety into co-liberation.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Is there a question in there, love, or do you want me to just bounce off?
Well, let's bounce off it. You know, I was kind of wondering on that, but yes, please, if there's something kind of arisen there to respond.
Well, I'm remembering Audre Lorde, who meant, you know, my co-lib folks will have heard me say many times, but she just brings me home to that. And when she says, you know, the white fathers told us, I think, therefore I am. The black mother within each of us. The poet whispers in our dreams, I feel, therefore I can be free. Yeah. And it's just that. And it's like, again, there's the remembering of who we are together, because there's something about, you could look at it as a returning to basics. The basic organizing principle for human life, certainly, and in many other species, is the mothering principle. And so for me, there's been, I mean, it's been a theme in my life because of the mother line and the violence in my mother line. And then the repairing, I was taken into looking at that somehow, you know, with the grace of God and the goddesses, I was taken into looking at what is the repair of the mother in me and the mother in us, you know. And so it's that black mother that whispers in my dreams. What is she whispering? I really want to hear what she's saying. You know, she's saying something about what it is to love with unconditional generosity. You know, she's saying something about that. And, you know, the mothering principle, there's three elements in there that I've been able to identify that feel really strong. One is the principle of creation that is in all of us, right? And that's where we come from, that principle of creation. One is nurture. That's, yeah, we're just driven to care, right? We're just so driven to care. And one is protection. Like, I can be a raging lion, right? And that's what, you know, the earth protectors, you know, and the conscientious protectors that Polly Higgins felt into, my God, you know, that raw, like, and that's, it's a roaring instinct in me. Oh my goodness, you put my 3 girls in front of me and my nieces and nephews and all, you know, yeah, I want to stand in front of the tanks with that roar, you know, I want to stand in front of the bulldozers. I want, you know, so it's like leaning into those instincts, like really my creation capacity, my protection capacity, my care capacity. That's the circle of life, right? That's how life keeps going. So there's something there for me in that feels like the root of the co-liberation work. Yeah.
And it's a collective thing and a personal thing as well. I mean, I really hear in what you're describing there of what we're kind of needing to do, kind of speaking about the kind of the collective wounds that we have of separation that have kind of brought us to this point. And it stands out for me there, what you're talking about, in that this is then kind of the crucial work in the change movements, that we also do this work on a personal level. Otherwise, you know, we sort of replicate from that kind of, you know, the same woundedness kind of along in what we create anew. So title of this conference, Co-creating the Emerging World, you know, how we are part of this change movement. It really sounds like one of the key things that you're tapping into there is what needs to go on this level. Does that kind of speak true to co-liberation?
It really does, John. And in some ways, what you've just said leaves me floundering because of the paradigm we're in.
Right.
Because this paradigm, it's like self-development, self-reliance, you know, self-organization, self, right? And it's like when we commoditize therapy, you know, it's transactional, it's exchange-based, it's instrumental, just like justice has become as well. That's not it. There's something new. I don't know what it is, by the way. That's the point of the inquiry of co-liberation with you, right? But I know it's not this. I know it's not how our Western and whiteness, I call it the Western and whiteness paradigm sometimes. It's not how that has decided self-work or inner work needs to, that's not it. So this is really exciting though, right? For you and I, because we can go, look, we know that is a shit pile that, that just leaves us on our own, actually, a lot of the time. So what is it? You know, what is this work of, I also, a dear friend came with the word co-laboring to me, you know, co-laboring, because this is a labor of love. This is how sometimes we look at it in co-liberation. We say we're in this labor, this intense labor, right? This birth, there's a death, rebirth thing going on for us, right? So we're co-laboring, right? You know, there's a point where, yes, it's me as the soul source that Skeena is in it, but much of that is in relationship to the soul source that Jonathan is, and to the soul source that Annie is, and Chris, you know, and all, you know. So it's like, okay, how does that work? And so those dimensions of co-liberation is like, there's a inner, the intra, there's the inter, the between us in relationship, including, and then including intergenerational. My friend Yanto has just said that it's in, you know, of course, you know, it's intergenerational. There's the systemic. There's a systemic. There's something for us to completely reimagine and redesign systemically, right? Some systemic agreements and commitments that are completely new. Democracy 3.5, right? Or there's lots of. And then there's the biospheric, right? And there is the Great Mother that Annie was talking about. That's where we come from. That's where we're at home. That's the life source, root source, right? And then there's the neospheric, which is the many realms, the multiverse, the great collective consciousness that is the multiverse, that is the God field, however you want to describe it, the divine creation, right? Now, all of them are interconnected, all of them relate to each other, all of them work at the same time. These are all parallel paths. But I think co-liberation wants to say, but let's be in the conscious awareness that it's all of that, and probably more that we can't even name, right? So it's the I in that, whilst it's essential, it's also just part of this massive, the multi-dimensional, you know. Yeah.
I can really hear how that is all of those levels at the same time, and you know, any of this that any individual or group or whatever may do, we're all walking each other forward into a direction, and let's kind of, you know, have that as the direction of co-liberation. I mean, I hear what you kind of say as well, to do with how the Western mindset has led us down into this direction kind of more and more, and I'm interested to kind of bring in to do with how your own background kind of may inspire or inform kind of this different kind of way, or a different view of it, and how your Sufi heritage informs and inspires that. Could you tell us a bit about that?
I just firstly want to say I really appreciate it when our differences and our manyness, our pluriversality is acknowledged and inquired, and there's curiosity. I feel that's part of the healing between us in relation and our relationship. So thank you for bringing that in. Yeah, so I come from Kashmir. Well, we're Kashmiris on both sides, my mothers and fathers. So yeah, this is quite an emotional place, I think, for me, just starting to feel into, wow, what that's a lot for me to feel, to bring. Because, you know, Kashmir is the longest running conflict on the UN agenda. It's actually the longest running. India and Kashmir and Pakistan, that's the site of the widest displacement of people ever known in terms of colonialism. 14 million people, with 2 million women and children killed and raped over that in that process. So a lot of pain there. So there's a lot of trauma that our peoples are doing, you know, needing and wanting to be in with the world, right? I'm from Jammu Kashmir, which is just above in the northern India. And in Jammu Kashmir, there's a cities of Sufis. It's a Sufi haven and heaven, and we're from the Rishi order, I believe. So Kashmiri, Rishi, you know, our surname is Kashmiri. My dad changed it to Rathor, which was my great grandfather's name, who was a Hindu, I think. So we're from the Rishi order, and the Rishis were persecuted because the Rishis were blending Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam. And my God, you know, I can't imagine the power that well, it's somewhere, it lives in me on a cellular level. And I'm just starting to tap back into it, if I'm honest, John. Again, feels part of my co-liberation journey. I've been a practicing Sufi for, well, we were until we were 7, until the Ayatollah came in and something shifted. I won't go into too much detail there, but basically patriarchal culture came right back into our lives when I was about 8 years old, and obliterated some of the Sufi practice that my family and we were in. But I think the information, which is what you're asking, how does it inform? So the 3 principles of Sufi practice, because it's not a religion, is truth and love and beauty. And I think in co-liberation we've been trying to create that. We're trying to have a truthful moment with our who-ness, our why-ness, our where-ness, our what-ness. And we're trying to really bring love right into the center of that work. And then, like the beauty, as Charles Eisenstein says, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, the vision and the creation, the being of that, right? That's how I'm trying to bring some of that in, and just is on a journey with it, yeah.
So that's kind of those 3 messages kind of are there within you kind of talk about Sufism being a practice, and co-liberation and sort of being a practice and a process is kind of what those are speaking to.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And kind of where does that kind of, do you see that kind of bringing a different, well, I mean, more broadly than kind of co-liberation, how has that kind of inspired your approach to environmental action and activism?
Yeah.
What you brought into?
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. Oh goodness, I feel it's been a metamorphosis. I feel my dear friend Gail says, you know, there's something of us growing up in public that's happened that feels quite embarrassing and humiliating, and I really feel that. Because I think there's I mean, certainly, you know, there was always that vision that many of us were trying to hold a place for, as a being a visionary movement, and what are visionary actions, what are prefigurative NVDAs, what are what are our constructive disobedience actions, and how do they speak to vision? And Tiana really went there with the pink boat and the garden bridge, and others. Forgive me, there are lots of people that were part of that, and that my first action was to dig up Parliament Square. It was the closing ceremony, our first rebellion. We had a closing ceremony, and I dug up Parliament Square at the centre, and we planted a thuya and a walnut and a plum. And it was like saying, this is this is what we need. And since then I've been going, well, what is that in me? And so my last action was to climb. So I'll talk about this on a personal, and then I'll say something on a bigger meta. It was to climb the balcony of the Guildhall in the Lord Mayor's Square, the City of London. And it was so magical, John, because I just had this dream around creating an amphitheatre of the human family. And then when we went there as part of the recce, Sol, who might be here today, and we were like, oh my God, there was an amphitheatre buried underground. There's an amphitheatre of thousands of years old in that square, in the Lord Mayor's Square, right? And where Roman slaves were tortured and kept, and performances were made of that, right? Oh my goodness gracious God, right? So what that action felt like, because it's become, the City of London has become the money laundering temple, right? If we want to use a story from the gospel, right? It is that. It administers the Anti-Life Project. It administers violence. Yeah. It legislates harm, right? And ecocidal and genocidal economics. That it is in charge of that. I mean, just like the gravity of what it represents in terms of what we're in resistance of, what we're in protest of, what we're needing to leave. So there was a climbing of that balcony to spray it with red chalk paint and to release the banner that says co-liberation, our freedom together. We need to become free. We need to leave that Anti-Life Project. And we need to do it together. So it felt to me like we were turning over the money launderers, the table. That was our, turn this thing over, right? No, stop this harm, right? So that for me is a prefigurative action to release, the message, and to say no in that way, and to come, the prefigurative book is coming into the human family. So we had the design was that we would have rows of people representing the protection of that as I climbed with others, and there was there was a real design around brothers and sisters protecting one another, the kinship, the whole human family being rewoven together. It was very, very beautiful as a dream, and it was severely interrupted by the police. So that is like, okay, that feels like, okay, if there's disobedience to make and to do, which I think there's a no as well as the yes. But how do those two meet? How does my no and yes meet? So how do I show with my body, my heart, my soul, my mind, all of it, all of me, to say no to this and yes, this is what I'm creating and wanting, right? So I think that's where co-liberation is going in terms of the NVDA part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely, sounds beautiful. I mean, we talked when you were saying about the co-liberation, about this being an ancestral thing, as this being kind of a multi-generational thing. And, you know, that sounds extremely powerful. You know, it's beautiful to hear how the vision, the dream kind of guided you with that, but how there's these spots where there's this amphitheater, which goes back to time where people were there as slaves, to what we have now with the Sufi. And how that kind of relates to this co-liberation, this freeing from all of that, and from all of that.
Yeah. Well, that, you know, there are at least 5 million children in slavery today, enslaved. You know, most of them are brown and black-bodied children. So it's like, you know, there's something in that allows us to, because of the caste system that we live and breathe the air of, that makes it okay for us here in the Western paradigm to go, oh, well, it's it's over there, you know, and actually we're enslaved, and that's much less tangible, but I think we are, you know. And so just returning to your earlier piece around how does there's actually my pain influences, my trauma is influencing, hopefully in a channeled way that is not from harm but from the recovery, to go, that's not okay. So that's influencing certainly the co-liberation project. But this mind body that's still in Kashmir and in my inherited culture, in my ancestral line, the Western paradigm and the whiteness paradigm doesn't have the hooks into us that I think the culture, I think white-bodied people and the culture here, you've had more years of leaving yourselves and leaving the earth. I think you've had more generations. Maybe I could be wrong, right? But I think I'm part of a culture that's had a less. There's just, yeah, and the until the occupation, and even now in many parts of Kashmir, we're in a different relationship with land and community and self.
Yeah.
And so, and then I'm not making that more. I'm not. Please understand. I'm not. You know, but I'm saying I have a different memory of it, maybe, to some of us here. And still I'm colonized and schooled and, you know, enslaved, and I'm still in my own whiteness privilege, right? I'm just being really careful, because it's not about being white or being, it's a whiteness that's in me. You know, we share something in that. It's a culture.
Absolutely. And as we kind of see, there has been that wounding for many generations here that has brought us to that separation, and we're really grateful for what you're able to bring and what your heritage and your ancestry is able to kind of whisper through you into the movement, and be part of all of those voices that are helping kind of guide the way forward. So Skeena, really thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a very lovely thing to say and share with me. It's tremendously heart-opening and kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this discussion, this talk. I can see in the chat there's been loads of questions popping up, so I'm going to invite Steve in now, who will bring some of those questions to you from the Zoom audience here.
Hi, yeah, thanks both, and it's great to hear you talking to us about this, Skeena. Yeah, a few questions. David has said, could you say a little bit more about the healing of trauma within co-liberation?
Sure, I could say a little bit more. Thank you, David, for that question. So there, in the 4 pathways, there's the pathways are interdependence, belonging, freedom, and power. And in every pathway, there are body-brain movements that are designed to create healing and trauma integration, or the capacity for it. Yeah. When we come into pathway of freedom and power, it goes a bit further in that. So for example, so you build up to create it by creating co-regulation and self-regulation. And if those words don't make sense, it's the capacity. What that means is the capacity to stay present through the triggers and projections and transferences and the pain, the waves of pain that we might get into in relationship with each other. How do I stay present and available to you? How do I stay available in those moments where my body is in some fight, flight, freeze activity, possibly, or even some dorsal vagal shutdown activity. So self-regulation and co-regulation work is built into the co-liberation process. And then from there there are bigger processes and I'm using EFT primarily, emotional freedom technique, but my own version that's grounded in heart coherence work and in group holding of that to do the trauma healing. Yeah. And then the power piece, the power with piece can go even further in terms of how does that come into the biospheric and the noospheric. So how do we heal intergenerationally, and how does trauma integration work when we do it in relationship to the land and the biosphere and also the noosphere? Yeah. The dancing around the fire piece and calling in the sacred wisdom, the great sacred wisdom that we are in, you know.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that speaks very much to me as well, especially the dancing and the drumming around the fire and all that. So that's something I really love.
Yeah. Ecstatic state, Steve. There's something here for me that is about creating ecstatic states of being. Audre Lorde talks about erotic power, right? Yeah. There's an ecstasy in Sufism that is like, we're really going to become ecstatic as part of the release and the integration and the letting go and the birth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, personally, I think sitting around a fire and sharing, that's links to what Annie was saying, is something so basic, almost primal, that's been with us, and the memories there. I think sometimes maybe we've lost it a little bit, you know, as we've gone along. We got another question about from Happy. Co-liberation would need to include non-human life forms to be authentic, to my mind.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little to that?
So that's in the dimension of the biospheric and the witnessing. So in in the processes work. So where you might make systemic agreements, there's terms of reference and frames for the work. And in those frames, there's always a question around how to relate to the more than human in the co-liberation work. So it's asking for systemic and working agreements to be made at every stage of the liberation process. In every pathway, you're making agreements with the non-human, commitments to being in the co-liberation with the more than human.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think your comments from Audre Lorde about the mother whispering in the dreams and saying, I feel, therefore I can be free, has really touched a lot of people. We've had a lot of comments and things like that, about very positive comments about how much that's touched people. And somebody else, Christopher, had mentioned, said it was very powerful. I think therefore I am really does miss the mark. Feeling is what is missing. Feeling is our true essence, not our thoughts.
Yeah. So should I say something about that, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
Sure. Okay. So what happens through trauma is to protect ourselves from, so trauma is the overwhelm that takes place in our systems, in our body, when something is so unsafe, and it becomes an overwhelming experience of a lack of safety. And the trauma is the stuckness of that overwhelm in us. Yeah. That's one way of looking at it. There are many ways of looking at what is trauma, right? And so the recovery is, and so what happens in that is disassociation to protect, because it's so overwhelming. How do I stay alive when I feel this? Yeah, if I remember this, or when it was so unsafe, how do I stay alive? So you go into disassociation activity. It's like, you know, if you think about the human brain, right, and all the neural pathways, and that, you know, what happens in the first 7 years of life are all those neural pathways start to connect up, you know. They start. So it's like the disconnecting activity in the body. It's like, okay, and in that disconnecting activity, you're able to feel less and less and less, and then you enter a pattern. So addiction and consumption and distraction, right? You enter also into behaviors that then take you away from feeling as well, because it's so painful, you know, and it's not safe. It's not safe enough to feel. So it's like the way back. So here's one of the things that I think is part of the dancing and the wrestling. Because what I'm noticing is, as we take people back into feeling, there is a concern around that, where that's being done with not enough support, and there's not enough belonging. That pathway of belonging isn't there, particularly that pathway of belonging, and particularly a pathway of power with, and it's really too much. It's too much, right?
Yeah.
There's a possibility of re-traumatizing. There's all kinds of dangers in there, actually. But the thing is, we have to go there in order to recover. So it's not, you know, it's like, you know, it's like there's a fire that we got to get into together. You know, it's, you know, when people talk about climate collapse as the house on fire. Yeah. And we got to walk in. And I think that's part of the recovery, and I think that's part of the increasing the capacity to feel. And yet we need to be really quite clever about how we do that, how we enter into that work of trying to feel more again.
It's important stuff. As you said, sometimes I think you have to go through and acknowledge the, I don't know, the angst and suffering or pain, and feel it to be able to move on.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm just looking for something else. That said. I know one person who said it's more of a comment than a question, really. And they said, love is never going to topple patriarchy, though. Patriarchy loves it when we love it. I'm not quite sure what that's exactly.
Say that again.
Yeah, love is never going to topple patriarchy, though. Patriarchy loves it when we love it. And I'm not quite sure. Certainly, I guess it's a comment, really, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah,
I'm not sure. But I mean, I could have a response to love is never going to topple patriarchy.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
I could have a big response around that.
Yeah, I bet,
Oh, and you know, real blessings for that, where that came from, you know. And it's like, so, you know, there's a book called Why Does Patriarchy Persist? I know some of you have heard me talk about this, by Carol Gilligan and Naomi Snyder. And you know, it goes back to the conversation we're having as to what happens to us as we grow, you know, as modern humans, in modern patriarchal culture, call it, what happens to the human, what happens to the newborn Homo sapien. there are the clues as to how we there's some words here that I'm looking for around how to meet patriarchal culture with love that releases it from our systems, and lets it go. We're letting it go. There's information in there. There's something to integrate from patriarchal culture, right? It's like trauma. It's like the great trauma. Patriarchal culture, you could say, is the great trauma, is of itself a great trauma response. Yeah. So there's something to integrate of it as a whole trauma response that it is. Yeah. There's information in there, and there's a letting go, and there's a reweaving, I think, of what it is the mothering principle is. I think we need to draw on the mothering principle to kind of find the firepower, but if you look at the clues are in how we come into the world and what happens to us in those first 7 years, and the frozen needs that occur, and the felt learnt sense of scarcity that happens in our body, and the learnt sense of separation that happens, and how it's Darshan Ovari's work of the evolved nest. She's written a book called the Neurobiology of Human Morality. Okay. And we can do this, is what I'm saying. We can do this, because not only is there great wisdom and sacred power here for us to draw on, there is incredible science coming from some incredible women in the world, particularly around what to do.
I think we've just had another brief call. We've got probably about another couple of minutes left.
Sure.
And it was just from someone saying that the comment, not from the person, but the feeling, I guess, behind it, about love will never conquer or overcome patriarchy, saying that, well, this has been used by patriarchy to keep us from feeling. If we would all feel properly, there would be an outcry.
Yeah, thanks, love. I love that, because I think it's, when we talk about disruption within, so in Extinction Rebellion, there are words around our NVDA, words like dilemma, disruption, attrition. So I think, it's when was it Wendell Berry who said the most rebellious act to take and make is to grow your garden and to plant food, something like that, right? So I am going, well, maybe the most rebellious act, right, is to recover feeling. And to disrupt. It disrupts to such a deep level patriarchal culture. I'm really careful about saying culture, because it's not man woman, that man woman. Patriarchy lives in me, right? So it's, how do I disrupt? Well, I disrupt it. I disrupt this paradigm, this way of being, by recovering my feeling, my capacity to feel. And in recovering my capacity to feel, guess what happens? Love happens. Love happens. Love like we've never loved before happens. Right? Love, ferocious love happens. Fierce love happens. Right? Fearless love happens. Love happens. And that is the power that will not only disrupt this paradigm, it will transform and can transform this paradigm. And whatever, it's the only thing that might allow us to become a humble, regenerative presence with the more than human and the great biosphere that we are part of.
That's good. I think things like this that you speak to touches so many people, and they didn't even realize maybe that they weren't feeling, or were not feeling as they could do.
Yes. my friend Gabriel calls it connection phenomenology.
Okay.
Which I love. I just wanted to share that with you because I love that term.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're that's the end to our question session, Skeena. And so thank you for being here and talking. It's obviously, looking at the comments, you've obviously touched a lot of feelings and hearts in this, and hopefully just going to spread the idea even further. So
thank you.
Thanks,
thank you so much. Thank you to all the organisers. Steve, thank you for your gentle the tenderness and the gentle way that you have been, and all of us, thank you so much for being here together. I'm very, very grateful. Much love. Much love.